Hello and welcome to the Executive Hub, the show that helps you grow your business with simple tips and strategies from successful entrepreneurs. My guest today is Adam Callinan. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Mustafa. Thanks for having me.
Good. Great to have you. And we're talking about how to drive predictable revenue and intentional profits for your business. Let me do the proper introduction for Adam, and we're going to dive into a very interesting conversation about revenue and profits. Adam Callinan is the founder of Pentane, which shows brands how to drive predictable revenue and intentional profits. Previously, Adam co-founded BottleKeeper, a bootstrapped consumer brand that scaled to $8 million in sales within 3 years without employees and was later acquired in 2021 with an 8-figure transaction with just 4 employees, marking Adam's second successful exit. Adam writes for Inc. and hosts the Growth Mavericks podcast, in addition to being a husband, dad, and avid sportsman. Adam, great to see you again.
You as well.
How's your day so far?
It's going good. It's a beautiful spring day in Montana.
Beautiful. Whereabouts are you in Montana?
Bozeman.
Love it.
We're on our fourth fake spring. We're going to get snow tomorrow. We have like 12 fake springs. So we're only on the 4th or 5th at this point.
Is it cold out there right now?
Right now it's 60. Tomorrow it will be cold. We'll get more snow over the weekend. So hot,
you
cold,
get
hot,
that
cold.
too. Similar up here in Calgary, Alberta, which I think north of you guys. Like it's nice and warm, and then it snows, and it's warm again, and then it snows, and it just comes and goes.
Yep.
You never put your summer or winter clothes away. You're always on your toes.
Yep.
Fantastic. So, talking about revenue and profits today, and I look forward to this conversation. But let's get into it, Adam. What is your story?
I have always been okay with risk and entrepreneurship, so I've always done that. I went into an orthopedic device startup out of college. I was not a founder of that. I was the first salesperson. We spun off a health insurance tech that I was a partner in. I sold my position in that in 2013 and started this goofy consumer product company called BottleKeeper. That was a side project gone mad with my cousin Matt. And that was all those fun highlights. Doesn't nearly get into the 27 times we tried to burn it to the ground and how difficult that 9 years was. But we did build a really healthy, profitable company that didn't require outside investment. And we were able to sell it. During a really good time to sell it. 2021 was a great time to get acquired as a consumer brand. So then Pentane is the latest company that takes my experience from BottleKeeper and sort of packages it into a software platform to help other early stage operators answer questions around profitability and operating a lean, clean company.
So what did BottleKeeper do?
So my cousin Matt was sitting on the beach drinking a beer out of a red Solo cup. And he's a little bit of a maniac, and he wants to drink a beer out of a Corona bottle at a specific temperature and sees people using water bottles. And he had this idea of cutting one in half and insulating it, putting like neoprene koozie material inside and putting a beer bottle inside of that. So we literally did that, like hacksawed a bottle in half, jammed a beer bottle inside of it. And it made this super koozie that kept the beer cold for way longer than you need it to be cold for and protected the glass, made it, where glass a lot of times doesn't make sense on beaches and pools and boats and whatnot. So it was this goofy side project that I didn't believe in that he convinced me to come on board with. And we're both very data-driven, math nerd, science people. So we put a bunch of pieces in place to test it before we spent any time or money on it. And that worked really well. And I had some strict guardrails based on my prior experience around hiring people, which is how we ended up down the 8 million in revenue with no employees. That was my fault.
Wow. So how does Pentane work then, as software?
Yeah. If we look back at BottleKeeper, there was a lot that we did that was dumb. And again, we tried to burn it to the ground a whole lot of times. But there were some things we did that were really smart. Because we had no employees, I had to operate every position in the business. I did all the paid media. Built the website. I wrote the copy. Made the videos, did all the emails, all the customer service, literally anything a consumer would see, I actually did with my hands. So the result of that is I needed data to understand how, as the CEO of the business, to operate those things profitably. So we started writing math and spreadsheets to answer questions. And we ran the company on that from start to finish. It was a huge part of how we were able to get to scale into tens of millions with no investors and very few team members. Excuse me. Fast forward post acquisition, I helped a few companies that my wife and I had invested in just as like a free advisor because I got bored after a while and realized that they could really benefit from some of those systems. I realized that they had a hard time really understanding how to pull levers inside of their businesses to maximize that profit number, that net profit number, and rebuilt some of those systems that we used at BottleKeeper in a much better, cleaner, sexier way. And it completely changed the way that they operated. So Pentane is the software version of all of that math, which gives us so much more flexibility and greater capabilities having it, coded into a software program than living on all these complex spreadsheets.
Interesting. So how did you come up with the idea? Was it like a specific moment or idea that sparked you to create a software out of it?
Yeah, after I helped those companies that we'd invested in, I took it to the next step to see if I could get someone to pay me for that information. And I got connected to a consumer brand that was having a hard time, and did the same thing. I mean, they were losing a lot of money, only had a couple of months of life left. And I got paid as an advisor to come in and help them turn the company around. And it was this kind of the same problem. Like they didn't understand how their company spent money. And I say that sort of tongue in cheek. I mean, they know that they had employees, they know they had team, they know they had health insurance and offices. They didn't understand how they needed to advertise in order to pay for those things. They didn't understand how to build their ad budgets and how those ad budgets needed to perform in order to pay for those things. And the math that we did at BottleKeeper answered those questions. And so it completely changed this company, turned it around. They were profitable 3 months later. And now they're up a year and a half later, up 300% profitably. So that was the aha. Like this is clearly something that shouldn't just be spreadsheets. This needs to be a product that can scale. So I can help a lot more companies. I mean, I can only go in and advise a couple of companies at a time, but if we can build a platform that can help hundreds or thousands, I mean, that's a massive win.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So with Pentane, who do you serve and what do you do for? I know we already kind of touched on it, but tell us about who you serve and what it does for them.
Yeah, we're primarily focused on early stage consumer brands. So early stage being $1 million to roughly 40 million in sales. I mean, when they come onto Pentane, they integrate all their APIs, their QuickBooks, their Shopify, Amazon ads, all the things that you would use as a consumer brand. And what they then do is they get to say, they put into a place, we call it mission control. They say, we want to generate a 10% net margin. And the system immediately tells them exactly what they can do today to accomplish that. It says you need to cut your fixed expenses by $12,472, or increase your prices by 7%, or increase your conversion rate from 1 to 1.25, or increase your ad budget to $32,000 a month at a 5.2 return on ad spend. So it's really, really prescriptive. And then they get to take it steps further and apply all those things at the same time with a guidance system. And so sort of the playbook on what to do and how to do it.
Love it. How many different kind of platforms does it integrate with?
We have, a lot. We have APIs, which are the worst thing in the world to build. Let's be clear. They're awful. We have, I think, 12 APIs right now. We have a Zapier integration. So the odds are that if there's an API we don't have built yet, we can still integrate that data via Zapier in a number of ways with Google Sheets and whatnot. So we can get pretty much anything into the system, but the API base today covers what a typical consumer brand is going to use. Again, it's like their QuickBooks Online, Shopify, Amazon ads, Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, Google Ads, Bing,
So it integrates with all of those ad platforms and it tracks the ad expense and figures out what's going on. And
yeah, it layers all of that revenue data and their advertising data on top of the expense data to answer really important questions that are hard to get to. I mean, the math is not simple. So it simplifies all that and effectively just gives you the answers to the questions.
Very interesting. Do you guys have AI integrating in there at all?
No, on purpose. And I say that because I use AI a lot. So I'm not like an anti-AI, or I use it constantly for all sorts of stuff. We don't have anything AI built into the system yet because I don't have a good enough use case. I know what that use case will become, but I don't have a need for it right now. And I'm really hesitant to just bolt on an AI thing and call it an AI thing, which is what like 90% of companies are doing right now.
Yeah. I was just thinking, with access to all that data, is there a way where we could get AI to analyze and come up with suggestions? Be like, hey, looks like
Absolutely.
there is, up and down here. You could improve this and that.
There are incredible opportunities to do that, with particularly with respect to the marketing data. And
Yeah.
that's the direction where I think AI gets really, really interesting, because I mean, the APIs are pulling in ad spend and date, but they can pull in, I mean, literally everything down to the ad level, all the data in and out of the ad level. So being able to use AI to go and pull learnings from all of that, I think is very interesting. But to like, AI is not good at math. Like, let's just be clear. AI operates at like an 8th grade math level. So doing calculus inside of a system that we can do with conditional logic works, and it's proven and it's simple. AI is just not that great at math. Right? It will get better, but it's not that
No.
great right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. A lot could be done with all that data coming in. And,
yeah.
wow. Um, Give us an example of a client you guys work with. What was a challenge they had, and what was kind of the results that you guys got for them, like within however long you guys work with them?
Yeah. I mean, the most glaring example was a company that was losing $100,000 a month as a $2 million a year business. So, I mean, you don't have a whole lot of life left at that run rate. And what the problem was they were looking at the return on ad spend, which was like 8, which is high for a typical consumer brand. Getting an 8 return on your ad spend would be considered great, but they weren't spending enough ad dollars to drive enough revenue to pay for their fixed expenses, which is why they had this great ROAS, but they were still hemorrhaging money. So what Pentane told them immediately, like it didn't take a week to dissect this. It tells you this immediately. What it told them is they needed to increase their ad budget by 3 times. They needed to 3x their ad budget, which is uncomfortable. That's like a scary, painful thing to do.
Yeah.
But because they saw with that, what they needed to increase it to, they saw how it needed to perform in order to get them to break even. That return on ad spend came down to like 3.5. I think it was 3.6. So if you increase your ad budget, then the needed return on that ad budget to accomplish your net profit goal comes down 100% of the time. That's the way the math works. It's how it works at ExxonMobil, at your dry cleaner. It's how it worked at BottleKeeper. It's just how it works. So they got way more comfortable taking that risk, and they didn't just 3x their budget overnight. I mean, they had an ad agency that was responsible with how they increased it to that. But over the course of a month, they increased their budget. They tripled it. And their ad spend and their return on ad spend came down, but it stayed above the minimum threshold level. And they went from hemorrhaging money to making money 3 months later.
Wow. Was there any other things that they could adjust to kind of increase profits?
Yeah, they got to see, because of the efficiencies inside of their business, they got to see that they were a bit heavy on the fixed expense side.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't understand. And again, I will caveat this with like, it's complicated. It's hard to understand, particularly when you're the one like in operating the business. And I have been there on multiple occasions. So I deeply understand it. When you don't know what it cost to add a person to the team or add an office to the team, like the extra weight that adds onto the business is significant. And if you don't know how the revenue needs to respond in order to pay for that person, it's a really dangerous position to be in. So they got to see if they reduced their fixed expenses they could put in the number, $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month, how much easier it got them to break even, how much easier it was for the business to get to break even. So they got, before they go and do those decisions, they got to see what the impact of that decision would be. So they did lean the company out a little bit. They didn't go on a firing spree. I mean, I think they removed 2 of 10 people that in hindsight, they look back and they're like, gosh, we wish we would have done that earlier. Their roles were not that important. They were good people. Their roles were not mission critical to the business.
Fantastic. Does your software do any 80/20 analysis on the data that comes in or expenses or this and that?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much. We're at the beginning. I mean, we put the first version of the product out, which was basically developers, here's a big spreadsheet with a proven business model inside of it. Convert this massive, ugly spreadsheet with boatloads of math in it into software product. And we had that first product out quickly, but that first product was built to be functional and not user-friendly or sexy or intuitive. So it made a
Yeah.
ton of sense to me. And as long as I was involved with the business, it worked for them. And I knew I did that intentionally. I knew that would happen. So
How long?
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying we completely reimagined the product from that learning. We spent 6 months, the latter 6 months of last year, rebuilding the product, which we relaunched in January. And that has gone really well.
Fantastic. How long has Pentane been around?
We started development on the product in spring of 23.
Okay. A couple of years or so?
Yeah. So we're at about 2 years. Yep.
Fair enough. Do you guys have any competition out there?
There are a lot of companies, excuse me, there are a lot of, or at least a handful of companies coming in to disrupt QuickBooks, which I fully support and appreciate because QuickBooks is about the worst product on the planet. It's a really good product that's kind of okay for everybody, which means it's not really good for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a $3 million a year consumer brand with 4 team members, like you don't know how to run your QuickBooks effectively. So there are companies like Phenaloop, there are companies, that are coming in and replacing QuickBooks, which is awesome. There are no real competitors that are taking what you're doing in your business and then layering what you should do about it in the directive way that we are, if that makes sense. I mean, there's 1,000 dashboards. We have a dashboard, but there's not anything particularly unique about a dashboard today. I mean, the information's real time, which is hard to do, but it is. So the real alternatives to that are basically like what you get, Lifetimely is an inexpensive plug into your Shopify store that will give you a net profit number. That's not really a net profit number because it's not taking into account any business expenses. And that's fine. Like it's better than nothing. Literally anything is better than nothing. So let's just start with that. But there isn't a system that is approaching the problem like we are.
Yeah, I love that what you guys are doing with you're giving them suggestions on what to do about the data. So like, here's your website numbers. Well, great. How do I interpret those numbers, right? And what do I do about it to kind of fix it or improve it and make it better as profits, revenue, and the rest of it?
Yeah, that was one of the big things that we learned in V1 of the product was that the system gave you all the data, but we would have customers come back and say, this is awesome, that I need to increase my ad spend to this at this ROAS, but I don't know how to do that. So that's the next big thing is to start getting really, really directed on go do this exact thing. And even if that means connecting them with a partner that can help, like conversion rate. If you need to increase your conversion rate from 0.8 to 0.92, if you don't have expertise in conversion rate optimization, we'll connect you with someone that does.
Okay. So you guys have a list of vendors that could help them as well?
We're building a list of vendors. Yeah. I mean, one that we talked to recently is IntelliGems, which is an incredible platform for A/B testing price on Shopify sites, which at BottleKeeper we did, but it was amazingly difficult. So if Pentane tells you can accomplish your goal by increasing your prices by 10.2%, you shouldn't just go increase them and hope it works. You should go and A/B test it. And there's not very many ways you can do that outside of a platform like IntelliGems. So
IntelliGems, is that what it's called?
IntelliGems.
For price testing.
For A/B price testing on Shopify. Shopify was always particularly difficult because they have a very closed checkout. And so properly A/B testing a company through landing, product, and checkout is really, really difficult. And IntelliGems built a whole app and business around that. They do some other stuff now as well, but they make that easy, which is really hard. So good on them.
Yeah, I saw a while ago. I saw a company A/B testing price with AI. I don't know. I don't think they were intelligent. I don't think it was Shopify only, but that's what they were doing. That was the only, and they did it with big brands. It wasn't like some $100 a month type of deal.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
Give us some of the milestones that you guys have achieved along the way with Pentane.
Yeah. The big milestones are early on, being able to turn flailing, struggling, really smart operators. They just didn't understand the math and the combination of finance and customer acquisition, which are dependent on each other. And the learnings that we got through the first year were unbelievable, and building a product, getting myself out of the way of building the thing that I think customers and companies should want, and building the things that they are telling us that they want, has been a massive milestone. Again, I knew that would happen. You have to start it somewhere, and then you have to let it live its own thing. But it's just the response that we're getting now from the companies that are seeing and coming into the system is really, really powerful. And it's an amazing thing to be a part of, actually changing the trajectory of a company that might be struggling a little bit.
Beauty. And what would you say are some of the challenges that you guys faced while reaching those milestones?
The biggest challenge for me is the fact that versus a consumer, so in BottleKeeper, as an example, in a consumer product company, you have an idea, maybe you do intellectual property patent stuff to make sure you're not violating someone else's, or you got it yourself. You go and you pre-sell the product, you have somebody make the product, and then 3 months later, the product shows up and now you have a company. It's like, okay, now we have the product, go sell the product. That's not how software works, apparently. In software, you have an idea and you make it into a thing, and then that thing needs to become something else. And that's like the goalpost just moves forever. If you let it, it will just move forever. So the development cycles take time, and I'm not a developer, so I can't work harder to make it go faster. And that's new for me. So that has been really difficult for me mentally, is having to wait on developers to do things. And our development team is exceptional, but it just takes time. And so the goalposts that keep moving, they feel like it will just move for forever, is brutal. But
so we do a little bit of software development on our end, and we started using a platform called Cursor AI.
yeah,
Believe it or not, within you use it. Oh, okay. We developed about 7 months of code in a week. It is amazing what it does.
We use it where we can. This is a positive point of contention between myself and our development team, because I want to use AI on everything to make it move as fast as humanly possible. The challenge in our system is that there is so much math, and all of the things are linked to each other with math, and AIs are not good at math right now. So getting that wrong is extremely dangerous. That is worst case scenario, is we develop some code using AI and it messes the math up, and now we're telling a company something that's not true.
Yeah.
That can't happen. So we have to be really, really careful how we use AIs and things at least within the code base.
Yeah. Sometimes it just goes and rewrites parts of the code on its own without telling you. And then next thing you know, it's not doing what it's supposed to. And we're like, when did I ever confirm or tell you to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, that can't happen in our situation.
Yeah, it could be scary in your case. I mean, in any case, if it just does random things on its own.
Yep, definitely.
Beauty. So, Adam, what would you say is holding you or your business back right now?
I'm trying to be patient, and I'm very adamant about not building this company on paid media, because I built the last one on paid media, and it was okay to do it then. This was 2014 we got acquired in 2021. The last couple of years of that, it got really difficult on paid media, but the first 5 years of that were you couldn't spend it fast enough. But that was one of the mistakes that we made. We weren't able to really diversify off paid media through the life of that business. So knowing where paid media is today, I'm very adamant that paid media not be part of our customer acquisition strategy today. I think that it makes sense at a certain point when you're adding fuel to a massively burning fire. But the foundational revenue model, I refuse to include paid media in it. The result of which is we have to get really creative, we have to get really organic, and we have to test all these different things, many of which I've not done before. So I would say the most challenging part, which is actually a healthy part of the process, is figuring that out and getting the snowball moving via partnerships. And that's largely where we're growing from, is via partnerships. We're doing partnerships with, paid media agencies, because they need their clients to be on Pentane. It solves this massive internal problem that they have with setting ad budgets and understanding how it needs to perform to be considered good. So we're growing on partnerships, and partnerships just take time. They don't, you don't have a call and then it starts the next day. They take time. So
Interesting. So is it like affiliate marketing you guys are focusing on?
No, I mean,
Or
no, it's looking at, our first big partnership was with Hawk Media, which is a outsourced big media agency in Southern California. And they want all of their internal clients to be on Pentane, because Pentane tells their clients what their ad budgets need to be and how it needs to perform in order to accomplish their net margin goal. We're historically speaking, this isn't a Hawk problem. This is an every company problem. A consumer brand completely arbitrarily sets their ad budget. They just make it up. They spend, and I don't mean to be, again, like flippant. They create an ad budget that they're comfortable spending, because ad budgets are risky. And what you're comfortable spending and what the business needs as fuel tend to not be in the same ballpark.
mm-hmm.
And so if you go into a Hawk Media or into any media agency, or even in your internal team, and you say our ad budget is $10,000 a month, and you just made that number up, but the business might need $100,000 a month in revenue in order to get to break even. Well, that ad spend has to perform at a 10 return on ad spend in order for that to happen, which is really, really unlikely. So because where instead your ad budget might need to be 25,000 and it needs to perform at a 4 return on ad spend, or a 5 return on ad spend, something that's more reasonable. So because of that whole situation gets set up to fail. And that they don't know it until it fails. And then they don't know why it fails. They just know it fails. And then, they go and try some other agency and have the same problem. So it really clarifies that important point.
Interesting. So does Pentane then give them one suggestion, like that this is the main one, or is it like a series of suggestions on here are a few things that you could do and they get to pick and choose? How does that work?
Pentane, in the guidance system, which is providing that information, I'll try not to get too math nerdy here, but there's that interaction between, as your ad spend increases, the needed return on ad spend to accomplish whatever your goal is. Let's just call it break even. The return on ad spend comes down. Well, that follows a curve. It's called a negative log curve. It's like an upside down hockey stick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Pentane, there's a slider on that curve. So it's all your data. It's your expenses, your everything. You have a slider that you can slide the ad spend on that curve and see how all the rest of the data in the system reacts to that. So you can slide that slider to $10,000 a month, and it will show you need to be at a 10.2 return on ad spend. And if you slide that slider a little more, you might be at $22,000 a month, and that return on ad spend is now 6.4. Slide it a little more. Like you have this really dynamic system that answers those questions. And you can also say, we want to increase our prices by 10%, see how all that data changes. Do a 20% discount, see how the data changes. Hire a new person at $10,000 a month, add that in, see how the data changes. So it's a really, really dynamic system where you get to pull all of those levers at the same time and see how they impact the business.
Interesting. Speaking of levers, can you name a few levers that you guys typically work with or look at in a business in terms of revenue or profits?
Yeah, the biggest, there are two big levers. It's like there's like a hierarchy of levers. There's like two really big levers, and then there's a bunch of levers that make up those levers. It's kind of like an umbrella. Okay. The two big levers that you can pull to impact your profit. The magic equation in a business, every business on the planet, but let's talk consumer, is your net profit is equal to your contribution margin. I'll explain what that is, minus your fixed expenses. Like it's subtraction. Contribution margin minus your fixed expenses. We know fixed expenses are things that exist whether or not you make money. It's your payroll, office, health insurance, 401ks, all that stuff. Contribution margin is your revenue minus the expenses associated to making that revenue. They're called variable expenses. So your variable
Marketing
expenses,
and ad expenses.
marketing, ads, cost of goods sold, shipping, fulfillment to the customer, Shopify fees, credit card fees, agency fees, the costs associated to making that money. So the more money you make, the more of that you spend. The less money that you make, the less of that you spend. So again, contribution margin, if we take your revenue, if your revenue is $100,000 and your variable margin, meaning the percent of every dollar you spend goes to those costs, is 70%. Of that $100,000, $70,000 is expenses, right? So that's gone. Like that, you've already spent it or you're about to spend it. The remaining $30,000 is called your contribution margin. That contributes to pay for the fixed expenses. So if you have less than $30,000 in fixed expenses, that $30,000 minus $20,000 in fixed expenses, you now have $10,000 left. That is your net profit. Does that make sense? I know we get into like math things and people's eyes glaze over. So I'm sorry if I'm doing that to anybody, but this is like literally, if you don't want to know what these things are and you don't want to have to understand how to do the math, that literally is why Pentane exists, is to simplify these things and to just tell you what to do.
Yeah.
So your contribution margin is tracked in Pentane a bunch of different ways. You can just look at it on a graph and click a button that says trend line and see if it's increasing over time or is it decreasing over time. If it's increasing, whatever you're doing is working. If it's decreasing, something is broken. Literally, it's just that simple. You don't need to know how to do the math. Just look at the chart.
So which one of these two is like, do you typically start with contribution margin or does it depend on the business?
Start with your fixed expenses. It is significantly easier when you, in that equation, again, net profit equals contribution margin minus fixed expenses. So in order to impact your net profit, you either need to increase your contribution margin dollars or you need to decrease your fixed expenses. We want to preferably be doing both constantly. But for every dollar you decrease in fixed expenses, that dollar goes directly to net profit. That's
right.
So like you want to make $10,000 more dollars, cut $10,000 in fixed expenses, and it goes directly to your net profit. Given that example, like that 70% variable margin example, in order to increase $10,000, you have to increase your sales $33,000 in revenue with no change to your return on ad spend. Like that can be hard. It's much, much harder to drive 10,000 additional contribution margin dollars than it is to cut $10,000 in fixed expenses. So where companies tend to get in trouble is on the fixed expense side. They don't realize what that weight actually does to the company. So that's the first place to look, no question.
And then would the cost of selling be the second place?
Yeah. So then you go to the contribution margin bucket and what are the things that can impact that? So pricing is a big one. We have an emotional tendency as humans to be reticent about raising prices, be afraid about raising prices because you think your customers are going to freak out. And some of them might. But the reality is if you can increase that your gross margin, which is your revenue minus your cost of goods, if you can increase that gross margin, that's like magic. Like doing things to increase your prices is like finding free money.
Yes.
So testing, increasing prices is the first thing that I would do in a heartbeat. And that broadens just by increasing that. If you don't have a change in performance, which again, in Pentane, it will tell you what your performance can change to. It'll say your conversion rate's at 1, it can drop to 0.85 and you're still net positive if you increase your prices by whatever percent. But if you increase your prices, you're driving more contribution margin without driving more expenses. That's the important part. It's like, it's like free money. And yes, I absolutely always, the thing is you want to be doing all of this stuff all the time, but there is a hierarchy of where importance to kind of poke your finger at first.
That's right. I know when it comes to price, I was teaching one of my workshops. There were about 18 factors contributing to a buyer's buying decision factor or decision-making process, right? So there's about 18 things that could affect that. And price is one of them. And most business owners treat price as 100% of the decision. And they're like, oh, if it's this much, they're not going to buy it. But There's like studies after studies, and you can even, like you said, A/B test it. And I've seen a lot of cases where you increase your price by 5% and your margins or net profit doubles.
Yeah.
All the time you become profitable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're at a 95% variable margin and you can increase your price by 5% and it doesn't negatively impact the business, you literally just doubled your net profit.
Yeah. 100%. Double, 200% profit increase.
Yeah. So test your prices. That's
I
important.
love it.
It tends to be more elastic than you think it does.
Yeah. So years ago, my business coach showed me a little spreadsheet that showed kind of a chart on how many customers or what percentage of customers you would lose based on the percentage increase in your price. So even at a 50 or 100% price increase, you're not going to lose all of your customers. You would lose a percentage of your customers. And in a lot of cases, you still make the same money with less customers.
Yeah. That's called
efficiency. And more profitable.
Yeah. That's efficiency.
Exactly.
Work smarter, not harder.
100%.
Quality over quantity. Yeah.
100%. Love it. I think this is an area that not many business owners pay attention to. With all the people I've worked with over the years, like profits is not something they really worry about. They're just worried about being busy every day.
Well, that's a whole other problem. I mean, the concept of busy is a challenging one for me. Like, look, if you're an entrepreneur and you've decided to go down the path of starting your own business, you have to make, and it's hard at the very beginning because it's an all hands on deck. Like, you got to get your head down and get it moving. And I understand that. I've done that. I'm doing it right now. But you have to get to the point and understand and get help if you need it, how to build the system so that the thing is not completely dependent on you. Because at some point you're going to own a company that you work for. And that company is not going to work for you. In which case, why? Why are you doing it? I mean, you can go work for somebody else and have none of the stress and risk. So, and busy does that. That's what busy creates. Just, being really intentional about how and where you spend time, I think is massively important.
That's right. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are working really hard, 50, 60 hours a week and not making enough profits. And one thing I learned from Dan Kennedy years ago, he says, a business owner's primary job and task is to make profits. That's your main job. Everything else is just a side thing. You're in business to make profits.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how not many people actually even think about that. What's your experience on that?
Yeah. I mean, we've got into, I think part of it is a cultural thing. It's certainly, I would imagine it's relatively similar in Canada. It certainly is in the US, where you just go, the game is you go and you raise money and then you just grow and, grow. It's not healthy growth. You lose money while you're growing, and then you go raise more money at the next round and you get a plug in whatever magazine because you raised money at some valuation and you heavily diluted yourself. And now you have a business that's growing, but hemorrhaging money. And then at some point we're dealing, we just heard, now we're kind of getting on the other side of, but in the last 2 years, it was really difficult to raise money. A lot of companies disappeared. A lot of companies didn't have business models that were durable because they never had to build a durable business model. Durable means you have to make money. In order for it to be anti-fragile, you have to make profit. Profit is the fuel. Cash flow is king. So go raise. I mean, it's not an anti-raise money thing. If it's what you want to do, go do it. But the second you can become profitable, you can raise a lot more and give up a lot less.
That's right.
And control your destiny for sure.
Have you read Scaling Up by Vern Harnish?
I have, yeah.
He talks about that in the book. Actually, funny, Vern is going to be my guest here in a couple of days on Thursday.
Awesome.
And what's it called? I love how he talks about that. He's like, make your business so it makes profits. So you don't have to borrow money. I mean, it just grows self-sufficiently on its own fuel.
Yeah. You just have so much more flexibility in life. I mean, you don't realize how much these things bleed over into your personal life. And when you get into that game, you just have to know what you're signing up for. And because it is a game when you're playing with someone, particularly when you get into the VC world, like you're playing with someone else's money that has a timetable that they have to operate by, and you have to operate by that. So it's tricky. I vote not to participate there, but that's my prerogative.
For sure. Adam, who's had a major influence on you as a business owner?
You know, I have a good friend who I will happily plug, named Jake Wood, who is, his short version is he was a offensive lineman at Wisconsin. He's a huge dude. He's like 6'6". Then he went into the Marines, became a Marine sniper, did a number of tours, came out of that, went into sitting on his couch, being bored in his underwear, eating a bag of chips when the Haiti earthquakes happened. And he figured out, I'm going to make a very long story very short, figured out how to snuck into Haiti with some Marine friends, some military friends, and basically set up the first hospital on the ground, and created this insane organization called Team Rubicon, which is a nonprofit where they take military veterans and put them into disaster zones to help. And they're, in a lot of cases, the first boots on the ground. And I've known Jake for about 7 years and saw him operate that business. At that point, they were doing 50+ million a year in revenue, which is really difficult as a nonprofit, and is now in a for-profit, and watching him execute again, and have deeply appreciated the way that he builds teams and leads.
What does he do that is different that you liked about his process?
I think a big part of it is the way that he has the ability to construct massive teams that I've never done. Like BottleKeeper had, at the point of transaction, we were 6 people total. It was Matt and myself and 4 other people. The company before that, we had 80 people, which was massive, and I was only managing a small piece of that. Watching Jake build this thing from nothing into something where suddenly he has like 500 internal employees and they're managing 200,000 US veterans. Like, seeing the structure and strategy inside of that at that scale is so fascinating and over my head. And I assume it's something that if I, got put in that position, we could figure out, but that just is operating on a scale that I don't understand.
Yeah. Team building is a huge skill, and it comes handy in running businesses.
Yeah. Even if your team is small, it's important. But once you get into, dozens and hundreds, and then, tens or hundreds of thousands, it's just a massive undertaking that I have a lot of respect for.
Very interesting. What's one advice you would give your younger self starting a business?
The advice that I would give myself is not business related, but it plays into business. And that is, to build my life around going and doing really hard things, physical things. I didn't have what I will refer to as a red pill moment on the impact and power of getting really, really, really physically uncomfortable by doing hard things until probably 7 years ago. The result of which is you build personal durability, and what seems hard to me on a daily basis, or hard to you or anyone on a daily basis, gets a lot less hard when you go and do hard things. They just become trivial. I wish that I would have had a much easier time in the first, certainly 5, actually, the entire life of BottleKeeper. I would have had a much easier time dealing with the massive ups and downs that business had I had the pieces in place to be more personally durable.
So you're doing more harder physical things now?
Yeah.
That kind of hurts? Is that what you mean?
Yep. Long, hard things that are really uncomfortable and painful. And like we talked about this earlier on before we were recording, like long distance trail races way up in the mountains on cliff sides, backcountry. I do a lot of backcountry archery hunting where you're miles and miles back into nowhere on horseback in 10-degree weather in the snow, chasing big animals around. Everything is hard. Literally putting on your shoes is fantastically difficult. But coming back from those experiences, it resets my perspective on what hard is.
Yeah.
So that like dealing with, you know, the person that doesn't show up for a meeting that, you know, is extremely frustrating to me is just not that big of a deal anymore. Dealing with the things at home, I have young kids. You know, that those things become beautiful because they're not hard. They're part of that experience. It really helps me to reset my perspective. And I wish I would have started doing that earlier.
How did you go, or what sparked doing this hard physical things that you got into?
I don't know if you want to go into a hunting story on your live stream, but I found myself, I won't go into the gory details, but I found myself out in the middle of, in the Montana woods, miles from anything, with a large animal on the ground with 5 minutes of light left. I was 2 miles from my truck, and I had to figure out how to get this thing out of that place by myself in the dark. It took 4.5 hours. It was phenomenally difficult. I had to drag this thing around a mountain, under no moon Montana sky that was clear. And at the end of that was the most magical experience. I mean, I literally was like, I have to find more of that. Not the hunting. It was just the hard. It was the really, really difficult, a little bit of danger, by yourself on your own, life-changing event.
Interesting. What's the question I'm trying to ask? What do you like about that? Because some people would call that crazy. As I do similar things. Like I go for a 15-hour hike, or
Sweet.
I work out 3-4 times a week, lift weights, and some people are like, "You're crazy. Why do you do that?" What do you like about that? What do you? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to be realistic about what your crazy is versus my crazy versus the next guy's crazy. It's all relative to your experience and to your baseline. So what I push gently is go do your version of crazy, even if that's run a mile, like whatever it is for you. Doing those things that push yourself are really, really powerful. To me, I mean, what I liked about it is it opened up this portal into being able to do something that I didn't know I was capable of doing. And that, granted, that was a physical thing, but things that are really, really, really physically challenging are also extremely mentally challenging.
Yes.
So it literally opened up this whole part of life that I didn't know was there. And that is that I am capable of significantly more than I thought I was capable of. And it literally just has opened up this whole other part of life. And it's not all about like chasing the next hardest thing. I mean, you can go down that rabbit hole and find yourself in some precarious places. But once you know that that's there, you can go and find that. And I most of the time I find that, either on long trail runs or in the backcountry doing that stuff.
Does building that mental and physical toughness transfer over to running your business?
100%. That's exactly. I mean, it transfers to everything. I mean, it's like the person that cuts you off in traffic. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all that stuff that it's really easy for us to get so myopic and like nearsighted into these tiny little things that set us off and trigger us. But when you go and do those experiences a couple times a year, or you build parts of that into your life, those things don't matter anymore because they're not difficult. They're trivial. They're just things that happen. So in business is the exact same. I mean, you deal with these big ups and downs. I mean, I'm in another, startup, and there are lots of ups and downs, but I know how to deal with them now. I'm significantly better at dealing with them now. Having
100%.
both the experience of BottleKeeper, having seen that from beginning to end and seeing the other side of that, as well as making these big changes in my life. I'm just much more emotionally durable as a result of those things, which directly.
That's right. I think running a business takes a tremendous amount of mental toughness, and you can't run around like a little baby crying about your daily setbacks. You need mental toughness for sure.
Yeah. I mean, businesses fail when people quit. There's a lot of reasons that people quit. Not all of them are as straightforward as just couldn't take it anymore, but a lot of them are, I just can't take it anymore. So if you can build that resilience and build that durability into your life, you will buy yourself time before you get to that point. And the longer that you can hold on, the higher the likelihood that you'll have some event that makes that company go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like as much time as you can put into it. The more resilient you can be, the more time you can put into it for the longer, and to have some weird outlier event happen that suddenly it goes from something to something big.
Yeah, I love what you said. Businesses will die when people or the owners quit. And that's true. If you give up, the businesses, unless you built a system of people that are going to run the business for you, if you give up, it's gonna die. Interesting.
Yep,
what's your vision for a Pentane?
To continue building two things. One is the partnership network. And we already have a path to this. It's already underway, where I want to be able to directly connect within the platform when that person used IntelliGems, because they came up already. When a company comes in and it says, you need to, you can increase your prices by 11% to accomplish this. And they say, well, I'm not totally sure how to do that. I want to directly port them into IntelliGems so they can start getting answers to those things immediately. Companies like that. Now we can do that with funding partners. We can do that with other technology partners. We can do that with marketing partners. We can do, there's a boatload of directions to take that with really high quality companies that I would have used at BottleKeeper. That's a huge part. The other part is to continue building more products that our customers are telling us that they want. And we know what those two things are right now and are starting to execute on that. But it builds a really robust system that can be, because of the way that we are structured, can still be really inexpensive and really reasonably priced, which I think is really important as we continue in this AI landscape where you can pop up software stuff for, today it's harder, but in 2 years, it's probably not gonna be that hard. So we have to be realistic about that.
Yeah. We were just talking about it the other day, like the speed of software development is going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And as AI gets better and stronger, it's just coming.
The crazy part is it's getting better and stronger like every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's advancing so fast. It's crazy.
It is going fast. It's crazy. Now I've been, we were developing this software with my partner, and I was telling him, as we were doing this, we did like 7 month worth of work with like senior developers in like a few hours. And I'm like, you have no idea how much money, time, and energy and resources I've spent on what we did in 3 hours. Like, you have no clue how fast this is going. I wanted to go run around the block and scream.
It's amazing.
Interesting. Adam, who are good partner firms for you? Who are good referral partners for you guys?
Marketing agencies are a great one. Again, we sort of collectively solve a problem together. It's good for their clients. It's good for them. Other technology partners that enhance how a company operates, meaning, there are a number of technologies that help with website optimization. Those are always interesting. Funding partners, where, a company needs some inventory financing, and those are hard things to do quickly because of the data that Pentane has. We can execute those things very, very quickly. So those are great partnerships. And in the world of financing and debt for early stage brands, the underwriting pass or success rates are down dramatically. So the companies that are providing that financing are trying to find ways to help the companies that want to take money from them get more healthy so they can take money from them.
So VC firms are good partners for you guys?
VC firms are interesting, but for a different reason. I'm talking like, examples like OnRamp. Kickfurther is an inventory financing company. OnRamp is is essentially equivalent to like Shopify Capital, where a company just needs to finance their inventory for a quarter and they pay it back as a % of revenue, those sorts of things. VCs are interesting because VCs want their companies. We're now at a place finally where VCs want their companies to actually be healthy and not just grow at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing that's being talked about, is like, you actually have to try to run a business and build a business that makes money. And that, we haven't been there in a while. It's a cyclical thing. It'll come back, I'm sure. So VCs are interesting because we can directly integrate and with portfolio companies, obviously.
Yeah. I was thinking like VC firms, they would probably want their portfolio to be profitable. And so we're like, hey, hook up with
Yeah, they are now.
Pentane.
Yeah, definitely.
And interesting. Adam, do you read books?
I do. I read a lot of books.
Give me 2 of your favorite books of all time.
I mean, favorite books of all time. How to Win Friends and Influence People is a book that everybody should read once a year. Is really impactful. I mean, some books looking at that. Go Do Hard Things. Go read Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. That's great. On
Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
Which one? Oh, Hard Things. No, although that's a good book as well, but for different reasons. It's called Comfort Crisis.
Comfort Crisis.
Michael Easter. Yeah. That's great. Right. I recently read The Psychology of Money by, I think it's Michael Hauser, I think is his name. And that was really interesting.
How you think we should read that?
Backwards people get with money. Yeah, it was fascinating. Really, really interesting read.
Interesting. Good ones. Win Friends, Influence People, Comfort Crisis, and Psychology of Money.
Yep.
Great list. Adam, what's one advice that made a big impact on your life or business?
How important it is to question everything. And I don't mean that in a conspiratorial, tinfoil hat standpoint, although if that's your jam, go nuts. Just because somebody says something or a process is done a certain way and it's been done that way for a long time does not make it the best way to do it. And frankly, it probably means it's not. So and looking at BottleKeeper was a perfect example. Like when we told people that we were going to build a scalable company with no employees, people thought we were insane because you don't do that. You go and you hire people and you raise money and you go and do that game. That's the game people go do. And I thought that was ridiculous. So, you get to build these things however you want to build them. And so as you look at processes and procedures, and you get told that there's a certain way to do them, just question the hell out of that every single time. Ask why 3 times and see where it gets you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Question everything. Yeah. I mean, I think people get used to certain things or people follow what the society does and we don't question things.
Yeah.
That's great advice. And I think that's where kind of a lot of innovation comes through by questioning things and coming up with like you guys did with your spreadsheet and math that you guys do. You're like, there's got to be a better way to do this, and so you just did it.
Yep. Solve your own problems in a different way.
Fantastic. Adam, this was a great conversation. You shared a lot of golden nuggets. Where can people... before I finish, is there a question that I should have asked and I didn't? And if I did, it would have added value to people watching or listening.
I don't think so, because we got deep in the rabbit hole of a little bit of math and talking profitability goodies. I mean, we covered all my favorite, things outside of family that go do hard things and run a profitable business. I mean, that sort of balances it out for me.
Love it. Seems like you do a lot of family stuff too.
I do. That's the most
How many kids you got?
2 kids.
Beautiful. Yep. Where can people find out more about you, Pentane, and reach out and get in touch?
Yeah, you can find Pentane at pentane.com, pentane.com. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, is pretty much the only social that I spend any time doing anything on. So yeah, me on LinkedIn, pentane.com.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, gang. If you are watching or listening, if you have any questions for Adam or I, just put them in the comments of the show. Share this interview with someone that is running a business and needs to be profitable or needs to be more profitable, and or with a marketing agency or other brands that could benefit from Pentane and improving their game and their numbers. And profitability is a huge thing, and it's an overlooked problem that not many business owners take seriously. So I absolutely love what you guys have come up with, Adam and team. So if you're watching or listening, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, share the link with someone. You've been listening to another episode of the Executive Hub. Yours truly, Mustafa Hosseini, and my guest, Adam Callinan. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye now.